Hi, Dave here from Ally Emergency Management, and welcome to the next video in our series on the operational planning process. Today's video will cover stage 3 of the OPP, COA development. COA development answers the question, what options are there for solving the problem and which option is best? We're going to refer to each of these options as a course of action. And what a course of action is a theory. And it's articulated in enough detail that we can explain how it is we're going to get down the path to success, who's going to be involved, what resources do we need, what are the sequences, but not necessarily enough detail that we can say this is our plan. So we need to develop it so that enough that we can explain it, but not necessarily enough we can execute it. During the COA development stage, we will take our courses of action, compare them against each other using predefined criteria, and compare them against the potential actions of our competitor or our rival. The process of developing your courses of action are fairly straightforward. Remember from our orientation stage, one of the things we did was talk about tasks, either assigned tasks, tasks that were given to us specifically, or implied tasks, tasks that we would have to do as part of the assigned tasks. As part of developing your courses of action, you compile and list all of the tasks you have identified. And then you start looking at these tasks in greater detail. You're going to identify the resources that you would need and are available to accomplish the task. And that could be time, money, personnel, equipment, things like that. You'll start to see probably a logical sequence. Maybe this particular task can't be started until another one has been finished. And in project management methodology, that would look like a Gantt chart. Your plan might include phases, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of discussion on phases, but basically if you've got a change in your resources or a change in your main effort or your orientation, you're probably going to want to phase your solution. So if you've got two teams that are organized slightly different to do one job, and then they've got to reorganize and do another job, that would be a very good delineation area to start a new phase, for example. You would take the tasks that you've identified, assign them to teams, and you want to start thinking about if teams need to work together, how are they going to be organized? Do you need different skill sets for each team? Are they going to different geographic locations? Who's going to be in charge? How they communicate back to you and to each other if they need to? These are all kinds of things that you need to think about when you're developing your courses of action. I threw this matrix together just to give us something to work through so that you can start to understand the kind of thoughts that go into developing a course of action. This would be part of a larger project called building the house. Now, I'm not an expert in building a house. I don't really know what goes into it, but I've just identified some very high level tasks to illustrate some of the concepts we've been talking about. So let's take a look at the first task, which is pour foundation. We've assessed that in terms of resources, we need 3 workers who specialize in concrete. We need a concrete truck, and we need 2 units of concrete. And it's going to take 2 days. We know that we have 5 workers, a concrete truck, 4 units of concrete. So everything looks good. Next task is pour the front driveway. We've assessed we need 3 workers, concrete truck, and 2 units of concrete, and it'll take a day to do it. We have the same number of resources available, and now we can see some issues. We need 3 workers to pour the foundation and 3 workers to pour the driveway. We only have 5 workers. plus we only have one truck. We can't do both those tasks at the same time. So now we have to make a decision about sequencing. We can pour the foundation first, then the driveway, or we can pour the driveway first and then the foundation. Happily, we have enough concrete to do what we need to do. The next task is framing the house. And we've assessed we need 4 workers, these workers specializing in wood. We'll need 5 units of wood, and we'll need a foundation. So that's an interesting sequencing issue as well, because now we know however we decide to do the driveway versus the foundation, we have to have the foundation done before we get the framing done. It's going to take 5 days, and we have 3 workers and 6 units of wood. So we're good for the wood, but we don't have enough workers to do the job in the time we've assessed we need to do it. We have to make some decisions here. Can we extend the time to do the framing by a day or 2 days so the 3 workers can do it? Or do we have to go out and get an additional worker because that time can't be amended? We're good to go for the wood, and we know we need to pour the foundation first. Next task, framing the garage. We need 3 workers to do that, 2 units of wood. It'll take us 2 days. We have the 3 workers, which is good, but we only have 6 units of wood total. We're going to need 7 units of wood to do the house and the garage. There's not a whole lot of options, I think, in using less wood. You can't very well build a house or a garage without a wall or without a roof. So we're going to have to go out and find an additional unit of wood to get this job done. We know that we can't frame simultaneously, and we're already in a resource crunch with the house framing. So we're going to have to either do the house first and the garage, or the garage first and then the house. Probably want to start making some decisions around main effort. What's more important to us, getting the house done or getting the garage done? Probably the house. So you can see how by assessing the tasks and the resources, we start to make these decisions about phasing and sequencing and main effort. And that's how courses of action are derived out of what you've done in previous stages. Whatever your course of action is, you need to make sure that it answers the following questions. Who, what, in terms of what tasks need to be done, how, your sequencing and your phasing, why, and this sort of ties to your mission analysis we talked about in previous slides. What's the purpose of the action? How does it move you towards achieving the mission? And what's your end state? What does success look like? Where are you going to do it? When? A great way of deriving a course of action is through brainstorming. Very effective in a military environment or outside of a military environment. The big advantage to brainstorming is it draws widely on the expertise and skills and experience of the entire group. And essentially it is the free suggestion of ideas for possible solutions. You begin with a statement of the problem and the requirements which any solution must meet. So everyone is on the same sheet of music, and then everyone suggests as many ideas as possible. You don't reject anything at the beginning, but once everyone's had a chance to input their ideas, then you go through a process of elimination. And that's how you apply your experience, your understanding of the situation, and a little bit of common sense to rule out any unsuitable ideas until you've just got a few practical ones left. And those ideas can then be the basis of your courses of action. We've talked about how to derive your course of action. We've talked about what questions a course of action has to answer. We've talked about how you assess tasks and use that to flesh out your courses of action. There's also what we call the viability test. These are attributes that each course of action, each option has to have before you can even consider it. And that is it feasible, i.e. are there enough resources available? Is it acceptable? Do the results justify the costs? Is it complete? Does it answer all those questions we talked about? Is it exclusive? That is it fundamentally different from the others? And this is one that my students always struggled with in the military context because they would sometimes change one little bit of a particular course of action and then label it as a completely separate course of action. Bit of a judgment call, but if you're building a house and you've got COA 1, which is build your house with red doors, and COA 2, which is build your house with blue doors, those are not exclusive. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And is it suitable? Does it have a decent chance of accomplishing the mission and getting you to the end state? If it doesn't pass the viability test, then don't go any further in the development. I'm going to spend a little bit of time and talk about risk management. Risk is almost always present. Doesn't matter if it's a military operation, non-military operation, whatever it is. You can't avoid it completely. What that means to planning teams is we need to be prepared to accept some degree of risk and not get to the point where we're so concerned about avoiding risk that we lose flexibility or our decision making becomes paralyzed. So we need to be prepared and able to manage risk when we're talking about the solution to any kind of problem. There is a lot of information out there in terms of risk management. People make a career out of risk management. I'm not one of those people, but in general terms, we're trying to go through a process where we identify threats and hazards, where we assess those threats, how likely are they to occur, and how severe they would be if they were to occur, and then start to make some decisions about dealing with the likelihood of those threats. We would implement some sort of risk mitigation measures and, importantly, monitor the operation to make sure that whatever we put in place is actually working. In general terms, there are 4 things you can do when dealing with risk. You can avoid it, which usually means not doing the thing that you think is going to result in the threat or the hazard. You can transfer the risk, which means trying to make it someone else's problem. You can mitigate the risk, which is taking action to reduce the likelihood or the impact, or you can accept the risk. And you might do a combination. You might mitigate and then accept the residual risk. There's some mixing and matching to that. As an example, a really good risk management tool would be to come up with your own risk matrix. What I've done in this one is put the severity in the rows of this matrix and the likelihood in the columns. It's a little bit subjective. You can decide what constitutes a negligible severity, marginal, critical, or you may have already your own classifications. Might be based on time delay for a project, might be based on money. A lot of them are. The point is, you take a look at the intersection of the probability and the severity, and based on what's going on in that particular box, that would drive how you do your risk mitigation or your risk management. The next step is the course of action comparison. And that's the opportunity to take your COAs and compare them against each other and compare them against any COAs that you've derived for a competitor or a rival or COVID or what have you. And remember, we talked earlier on about most likely and most dangerous COAs for the rival. and however many COAs that you've come up with. We usually go with 3, but there's nothing that says it has to be 3. And that gives you the meat that you need to do your COA comparison. You're going to have a list of predetermined criteria, and those criteria are based on what aspects you've assessed are important for you to achieve your mission. It might be security, it might be speed, it might be a dollar figure. There are all kinds of things. The process of taking each of your COAs and comparing them against each other and against your rivals' COAs is referred to as a war game. And I'm going to do a whole separate slide series on the war game, so we're not going to talk about it in too much detail. But once you've gone through this process, you're going to have a ranking of your courses of action based on how well they met up with the criteria that you've decided. At this point, you probably want to tell somebody about where you are in terms of getting your course of action. So some kind of briefing to the decision makers in your organization, explaining what you've done, what courses of action you had, and what you've come up with as the most applicable one and why would be very, very appropriate at this stage. And that is COA development. For the next video, you're going to get a twofer. I'm going to be putting stage 4 plan development and stage 5 plan review of the OPP into the same video. As always, if you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at the email address shown, or check out our website at www.yourally.ca. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I'm looking forward to sharing the next video with you.